Welcome to our talk, the place where we agree to disagree. Today, my topic is motherhood, and the guest is Ashwita Goel from India. Hello, Ashwita. Welcome.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste to you. I was wondering whether I should introduce us being. It's rather an audacity for a childless woman like you and for a man to talk about the topic of motherhood. So, but before we get into the topic, let me quickly introduce you to my viewers. Ashwita Goel is in India and has 23 years of experience with different practices, healing practices, that is. She is a second generation healer who was exposed to a plethora, a word I didn't know before I met you, of spiritual teachers, learning meditation and yoga already as a little girl. During her early teens, her mother became a Reiki master. Ashwita spent the next many years assisting her, not realizing what she was being prepared for. After a few years as a software engineer, Ashwita transitioned into holistic healing and took up Reiki professionally in 2007 to help those around her cope with the fast paced lifestyles prevalent to India's Silicon Valley. Ashwita combines ancient teachings with contemporary ideologies and is an avid writer. She has 7 books to her name. Please, dear viewers, do check the description on our page, which we're going to make for Ashwita. You will find the references to her books also. Welcome, Ashwita. How happy are you with my introduction? Did I leave
Very
something out?
happy. No, it was perfect.
That's good to hear. I'm pleased to hear that. Um, I was referring to the audacity, and uh, I learned a lot preparing for this art talk with you. Even the word antinatalism I wrote down. I know that's a word you're going to pick up on later. Um, But in my personal experience, being a father of 2 grown men today, 35 and 36 old, the two of them are. So, having been a parent and my wife being a full blooded, sensual woman who reveled in her motherhood, um, it often happened that when we met people who did not have children, whether they were women or men, it doesn't matter, that we noticed that when we spoke to them, sometimes my wife and I, looked at each other sort of, and in our look, there was an exchange. She doesn't know how it is to be a mother or a father.
Yeah.
Do you know that? Have you been on the receiving end of such a little bit down your nose kind of being looked at?
Probably only from my mother. In the sense that now I don't think anyone has ever told me I don't know what it's like. Because as a healer, sorry, let me just plug in my charger. We checked everything but this.
Perfect.
As healers, we do learn to empathize with the pains and everything. My sister has a child, so we discuss a lot of things. Um, of course, if I were to have a child, I'm not saying I'm going to be such a great parent. You guys don't know how to do it right. So that's not there either. So there's very less incentive for them to say that. My mother does say that having children changes you. um, which, if you don't have children, you don't mature in certain ways. But I have my own retorts to that. So
Oh, please do. I'm curious. So I'm saying to you, come on.
I
I
I
know
really
what
want
motherhood is all about. How can you? And you never grow up
exactly.
until you've had your own children.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I genuinely don't want to hurt anyone. That is why I did not say it. But I mean, when I heard that for the first time, I said, being jailed also changes you. Just get jailed for like a week and you will never be the same again. Try to talk to somebody who's done drugs and they will tell you it changes you, and having to recover from that, right? Being an addict and then recovering from that changes you. It gives you a certain depth. So every single experience gives you a certain depth. Going for jumping off a plane gives you every single experience changes you. And for me to see that as a measure of someone's character or worth is, I think it's just,
So let me change the subject. There's a painting behind you. What can you
yes.
tell me more about it?
This is this is not the original. This is a print. um, my art teacher exhibits internationally, and he wanted to bring his work to India predominantly because he felt it wasn't up to the mark. And so, well, obviously he found me interesting because, he was like, you're a very interesting mix of complete opposites. You're very modern in your outlook and the way you dress, but then you're very traditional in a whole lot of other aspects. So it's like you don't make sense. And for an artist, I think that's very, interesting. So he was like, can I paint you? And honestly, when he asked me, he said, can I paint you as Durga, which is like, the goddess in India. So I was so excited. I said, wow, so I'm going to get to dress in these beautiful clothes. I get to look like a goddess. He said, why can't you be a goddess in normal clothes? I was like, oh, so can I then wear something, like I'm mostly in all these short dresses. So I said, can I wear what I usually wear? And he said, no, that's not acceptable because I don't want legs. If you have legs, the whole painting goes in a different direction. So we went through a lot of things, saw what matches, what contrasts with the background. We wanted it in the dark. We wanted three different sources of light. So yeah, it's a painting of me. It's a live painting. That's why it's not that accurate because he's painting in pitch darkness. And yeah, it was 2 painful weeks because I had to pose like that, and I would sleep with heat packs all night.
Yeah, you were talking about experiences, life experiences changing us one way or the other. And if I may, I'm not a mother, but I'm a father. And um, this is actually my mother, a portrait of my mother.
Hmm.
And this is actually a portrait of my son. And this
Hmm.
portrait was part and parcel of his ritual into manhood when he was 21. It was a
Wow.
long, drawn out process, obviously, but then we ritualistically celebrated it. And this was part into that. And I know that him being painted and sitting there, he felt very exposed, very naked. It was a very strong, powerful experience for him. Um, and coming to think of it, it was a ritual into manhood, if you want, like rite de passage, a passage celebration, like a rebirth to some extent. And now we're back to our topic of giving birth, of motherhood. And of course, I gathered that your mother would have liked you to have children. And it is clear that motherhood in general is mainly associated with very positive ideas, even being glorified. So tell me a little bit about, give me an insight about your disputes maybe with your own mother about your decision not to have children.
I don't think we really had any disputes, because that way I really did have great parenting, So she's never forced it on me or anything. It's just in these discussions that we randomly have, that she's just dropped these things. And I think she's more or less been okay with it also, because she's seen how I am and what my priorities are. And she is like, yeah, okay, I did feel bad for a while, but I think I'm mostly grateful that you did not have kids.
I understand. We in Switzerland have a saint, a national saint. Um, Brother Nicholas is his name. And it's an interesting story, highly criticized by feminists. And it's an interesting story because there is a similar story with Buddha. Having left the family, and this, I think Buddha had many children too. And our national saint, how many?
One.
He had only
Rahul.
one.
Yes,
Okay.
Rahul. Yes.
This is telling you how much I know about Buddhism. Our brother Nicholas had 10 children, and the youngest one was 1, and the oldest was 20. And he left his family to go into solitude in the forest for, one might say, spiritual reasons. And one of the things I learned, which I'm happy to share with you, Buddhist monks should be detached from the duties of family life. Only then can they focus on reaching enlightenment. So that's a similar parallel. And I'm sharing this with you because as a teacher, I often have had women in my seminars in their 50s, younger also and older. And very often they have, for many decades, suffered either because of their choice not to have children or because nature forced it upon them. They couldn't have children. Yeah. And very often they've suffered mainly from the pressure of society and, of course, their own expectations, even related to their right to be in their existence as women, because in a way they failed if one defines womanhood as bearing children. And when I share with them that the question is justified to ask whether having children, motherhood, could be a hindrance on the spiritual growth. And by the way, a question I faced by a becoming teacher who seriously contemplated that and ended up being a very successful holistic teacher and having children, just by the way. But it's a serious question. And when I share with these women that there are precedents, and there is this idea, it's amazingly liberating to these women because they see that maybe having no children is also almost like a karmic opportunity for them to unfold their spiritual side without that attachment to the material side through children. Does this resonate with you? I've had a bit of a monologue now.
It's an interesting perspective. For me, it has been the opposite, wondering if not having children has limited my spiritual growth in any way. So, because of course, if you are looking at spiritual development only as what in Sanskrit we call sadhana, the practice, of course, if you have children, you're not going to be able to do 15 hours of meditation a day and stuff like that, so yes, it's going to limit your spiritual growth. Well, you may not even be able to do 1 hour of spiritual practice every day, and it might limit your spiritual growth like that. But I think if you cannot progress spiritually as a mother, then you cannot really progress spiritually as a non-mother either, because it's the temperament. For me, a spiritual person is somebody who is learning from every single obstacle that life throws at you. I mean, children are not the only obstacle in life. You have a whole lot of other obstacles. Yes, children are probably the most persistent obstacle in life. As a single person, you have an obstacle and then you relax. And then you have an obstacle and then you relax. As a parent, you probably just have obstacle, so depends on the children, but
Well, I was just about to say there are many viewers now who cringe at you describing children as obstacles, but dear viewers, we're exactly spot on with that cringing. That teacher actually, when she raised the question, can children be a hindrance in spiritual growth? She asked the question amongst a bigger group in a workshop kind of situation. And most people, me included, reacted instantly, no, our children are our most important teachers. So they're the very opposite of an obstacle. They're actually the major catalyst for growth.
Yeah, so I totally agree with you on that. Obstacle, I meant more in terms of the issues that push us to learn. But then every obstacle is merely an opportunity, So if it's an obstacle, if obstacles pull you down, then you're not getting anywhere by having children. But then you're not getting anywhere without having children either, because that approach will not take you anywhere. Whereas if you are the sort of person that takes every opportunity as, what can I gain from this? How can this make me richer? How can this make me more wholesome and more maybe kind and more big, then definitely it's a very potent tool for growth, for self-development. Yes.
It's a very hot potato we are touching upon. And as I did my research in preparation, the word taboo was very often used. And we'll get to that in a while. Did you find, I asked about your mother because that's an obvious question, but did you find socially that there is a lot of pressure and expectation within your friends of circles, within the people you work with, as a healer, as a teacher? How do you feel? And you're in India, but I suspect that the dynamics around the social pressure of motherhood are not that different than in America or in Europe. But tell me a little bit, how do you feel about that?
I think luckily India is a place which is so large. We have 1 billion people plus, that there's a group for everything. There are groups of people that are pro kids, and there are groups of people that are not so interested. So because of being a healer, and I think having access to so many people, I did get to choose a community, which is, I do have friends with children. I have friends who don't have children but really want children, and then I have also friends who don't want children. So I think I have been fortunate to be in a community where everybody is like, to each his own. I don't judge anyone, they don't judge me, so it's quite okay. But yes, if I was to integrate with the normal society, see, on one level, yes, I may be judged, maybe even by neighbors and other people, and but there's the judgment is a little bit less because I'm a spiritual healer, and spirituality, you don't have children. But I'll tell you, on the other hand, I have been told by several women as well that having a child was the biggest mistake of their life. I think as young as, I think I was probably just 26 or 27, and I was working, and healers, we are more empathetic, people connect with us. She wasn't very close, she wasn't a good friend or anything like that, but in my I had gone downstairs for a walk, and we were just walking together, and she has these lovely daughters, okay, among all the kids in the apartment. Her children were my favorite. And then she pulls me aside quietly one day and she says, Ashwita, if you can help it, please do not have children. It will ruin your life. What?
This is exactly one of the taboos I was referring to. And
Yeah.
I'd like to introduce an Israeli woman, Orna Donath. She's a sociologist, and her work deals with voluntary childness and and this is not the same thing, Life Without Children. She is a PhD at the Tel Aviv University on the topic which you just brought up, regretting motherhood. And I have a short video which I'd like to share with you.
We are being told that there is only one way that any woman, because she is a woman, should follow, and that is motherhood. And our imagination is being occupied by this only allegedly one road. And we don't even want to talk about the possibilities that women might regret it. We don't want to talk about the possibilities that women may not be mothers and will not regret it. We just talk about this one road that is divided to two. Women who will not be mothers will surely regret. Mothers never regret. And in this book, I'm trying to sketch a more complex roadmaps of flesh and blood lives of women. We exist, all of us.
This is a very, very interesting here. This is one of the things I learned. I got onto this webpage, motherhoods.com, where she is amongst 6 women. It's an interesting movie, which I can recommend to anyone who seriously wants to contemplate matters of life. And this is a very central one. We all have a mother and what she went through. And this website has the heading, Being a Mother is Only an Option. And I find that in itself a very powerful statement. So would you like to talk a little bit about antinatalism?
Explain I guess I was an antinatalist way before, like years before I realized the term. I think it was only 1 or 2 years ago. I was like, oh, there's a term for people like me, you know? I think for me, it was more because of the spiritual practice. I was already very in tune with the earth. I think about a decade ago, I wrote an article actually that, are you Cancer? And really the title should have been, We Are Cancer. In my eyes, I see human beings as being Cancer on earth. What is cancer? Cancer is not a disease. It's just one healthy cell of the body decides that its life it has greater priority than the life of every other cell on the living organism. So it starts reproducing, refuses to die, no matter what. Just keeps increasing. And I feel that that's what has happened to the earth. And I was like, I cannot contribute to this. I just cannot add to the pain of Mother Earth. And that's where it was really coming from. It was coming from this identifying as the earth and working in favor of the collective as the earth, not collective as humanity. That's my perspective of it. Of course, antinatalism, you can have so many perspectives, but for me it was really about being the earth rather than being a human.
I hear you. It reminds me, when I was a young man, I had a boss in the company, of blue-blooded descent. His family goes back, I don't know, to the 13th century or something, a baron. And he was kind enough, I'm a peasant, a working class boy, but we worked in the same company. And he had a very generous heart. I'm still grateful to him. And he invited me once with my then girlfriend, now wife. And we had a discussion in his home, the 4 of us, his wife, he, and us. And I argued, I said, this world cannot afford more people, very much along the lines like you just described. And he listened carefully. And for me, it was clear I will never have children. And then he looked at me in earnest and he said, well, have you ever thought that you might be particularly privileged in the world, even though, you know, a peasant in Switzerland compared to the rest of humanity is wealthy, is well educated, has a lot of privileges. And from that standpoint, that Mother Earth is suffering from the cell which has developed into a counterproductive growth on the planet Earth, environmental damage, and so on. If humanity wants to find a solution, yes, of course, antinatalism may be one of the answers, or one of the contributions, rather, to be more precise. But he turned the table on me and he said, as a privileged man, could it be that you actually have a responsibility to contribute to the solution by having children who, again, will be privileged, and if you educate them that they serve humanity to solve the issues we have, wouldn't that be an argument in favor of having children? And this, to me, was a key turning point where I revised my opinion and I almost said succumbed to parenthood, becoming a father. It wasn't quite that, but it was a deciding moment for me. Can you follow his thinking?
No, I agree with him completely, but then I would say adopt. You know, there are so many underprivileged children who could do with more care, who can, you know, really add value to the world. So instead of bringing another child into a world where there are so many people who are underprivileged and therefore will potentially add more of a mess to the planet, you know, through violence and criminal activities, because they have not had the right environment growing up. I would rather invest all of that energy and, you know, effort into adopting a child and, you know, offering it like that. For me personally, like I said, I've not had much of a desire. Plus, I would rather invest all of that energy in nurturing and parenting 1,000 adults rather than one child. So for me, that was a different choice. But I think if people really want to be responsible towards the earth, adoption is something I very highly, you know, respect.
Yes. In fact, I grew up as an adopted child. So I'm with you on that. And yet, I heard him. I think I've used the same argument back then. And I hear him that this isn't entirely the same as perpetuating a chain of privileges in the positive sense, not in the greedy sense, not in the suppressing sense and exploitation sense of other people, but seeing, you know, privileges are fine to have, but the flip side of that is duty to serve humanity. But I'm happy to accept it as it is, and I fully applaud your
Can
opinion.
I add? My mother has had the same kind of discussion. She did not want children either. And she had a convincing argument as well. So she did not want children. And so once they were part of this meditation community, and my dad took her when some sage had come along, and they were having a conversation. My father just mentioned, oh, she doesn't want children. And he said, why don't you want children? She said, what a horrible world. Why would we bring another person into this mess? You know, and he told her, well, being a human being is the only way you can give a soul an opportunity to attain moksha, basically to get liberated. So if for nothing else, do it for that. So for her, that was the convincing argument. And of course, I've heard this. I do agree with her, but I mean, I think now it's reached a point where I don't see much point anymore.
Yes, and this is very valid, and I think that's a very strong point you made there, Ashvita. We are in the 21st.
Also, I think, yeah, because I think also, you know, for me, this is the only reason one should have it. I'm not saying it is the only reason, but for me, it's the only reason that one should be having a child. And that is what makes me feel even more disappointed, because a lot of people who want children so badly actually do nothing in that regard. According to me, if somebody is going to have a child, it needs about a year of preparation mentally, on the physical level, and then having a strong spiritual practice during the pregnancy, and then having the children hopefully in the most natural way possible, but that's depending on personal belief, and then raising them accordingly, and getting educated, reading up on parenthood, and learning how to be good parents, because our generation has had zero exposure. Like when my mom had children, she had already had experience raising children, her siblings and others, cousins. Most people that want children today have never spent like a week with a child day in and day out. They don't know what it's like, what problems child raising can bring. They have absolutely no idea what they're getting into, and that's
This
not fair on a new life.
This is so right, and I think most parents have had this experience that they're saying, "Well, I need to have a license to drive a car. If I had known what it means to have a child, I wish I would have had a broader knowledge, broader information." That's partly also of how humanity has unfolded, and obviously in India, that's today not much else than anywhere else in the world, by what you just said. And we mustn't forget that we are at the junction now where all the big minds are saying it's not a minute to 12. It's like we're past 12. The question is, do we survive this? So new ideas, new thoughts beyond the realm of tradition and mindset, which we've carried on so far, need to be explored. So I'm with you. Should we quickly look at the end of this video? Because let's have a look.
I know that there might be feminists who will see my study as dangerous because, but I'm not here, I'm not sitting here in a kind of a propaganda against motherhood and in against mothers, against children, or against childbirth. I'm sitting here in the name of calling for more and more women will be able to be the owners of our lives, our bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, our decisions, our fantasies, our dreams. So I will not, I can't, I must not sit here and tell other women what to do.
I think that's in your spirit, isn't it?
Yes, very, very much. I would tell women what to do, though. A little bit different there, but in the sense that in my observation, in my experience as a healer, what I have come to learn is that I classify women as natural mothers and not natural mothers, So there are women that have told me, you're wrong, it's not like this. Not everybody regrets having a child. Yes, of course, not everybody regrets doing anything. But from my observation, I have seen that there are so many natural mothers, and for them, childbirth is easy. Raising the child is easy. So anyone who is struggling to have a baby, doing a little bit more therapy is probably going to help. But there's these natural mothers for whom it just comes easy, and raising children is so easy. The whole process is easy. They don't feel traumatized by their children. And then there's the other category, and it has nothing to do with wanting to be a mother or not, because I've seen some people who very desperately want to be mothers, and then they have a child, and that's when the postpartum depression comes in, because they're like, this is not what I expected it to be. So then it is utter hell, and it's not a small price to pay, because it's probably a good 2 decades of hell for them. So, and the saddest part, like she rightly said, the saddest part is it is so shameful to regret having a child that nobody will say it out loud. So we're just propagating this myth, that there's no such thing as regret, but it exists. And as therapists, I think we get a lot of that.
Well, I agree with you. I think we picked up a hot potato. I think this deserved much more time than we are giving it now. But we are coming to an end of this issue of our talk. Ashvita, how was it for you so far? And then I say goodbye to you.
It was interesting. It is a topic I'm so afraid of being public about. So thank you for making it so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Ashvita, thank you very much. And I say goodbye to you. Dear viewers, bye-bye. Dear viewers, I hope you will join me again next time round. See you in 3 weeks' time.